4, 3, 2, recording. Hello everyone, and welcome back to an all-new episode of 512 FM. I am your host, Clarissa Nash, and I am excited to be here. I'm always excited though, so that's nothing new. Anyway, if you are watching this video, and this time I actually have a video of me recording because I have a great setup. It's all cute and stuff. But if you're watching this recording and you hear me go, stop it, or you see me like looking around, it's because my little bun child is hopping around and he sometimes likes to hide underneath my desk. It's something new that's happened. It's adorable, but I wasn't ready for that. So, yeah. So let's get started. Today's topic is going to be about the social uprising and how brands are handling it, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter. One thing that I've kind of noticed in all of this is that Black Lives Matter has been around since 2013, and we'll get a little bit more into detail about that in a minute. But it's only been the last kind of month, I think it's been a month almost, that brands have been sending out these emails and talking about their views and their values and blah, 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 blah. So I want to talk about that, and I also just kind of want to maybe do some other housekeeping stuff, maybe, possibly. But let's kind of start off with some not light news, but before we get into that, how are you? Is my first question. I know that you guys will probably answer and I can't hear it, or you may not answer and I still won't be able to hear it either way. But yeah, how are you? How are you doing? How are you doing during this quarantine? I know that there are some states that are opening up. I feel like only one of those states is allowed to open up, which is New York, because at least they tried, you know? At least the governor did everything that he could to make sure it went down, and the rates went down and the hospitalizations went down, and so they're opening up in phases like it's intended to happen. But meanwhile, in my neck of the woods, Texas has decided to go from everything is closed to let's all go to the water park, and now everybody is at the water park during a pandemic, and our rates have increased in terms of how many people have tested positive, and it's not because of the protests, because protesters have been wearing masks and they've been using hand sanitizer and passing it out. So maybe the social distancing thing isn't something that can happen, but it's a protest. They try where they can, but they are wearing masks. Whereas the people who were so hell-bent on having everything open so they can go get their nails done and their hair done, they weren't wearing masks. And they're tracing this outbreak back to Memorial Day. So this is before the protest even happened. And our positive cases have gone up. A little bit has to do with more testing being available, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the virus does what it does, spread. So yeah, our governor decided that, first of all, the virus is spreading at an unacceptable rate, because there's an acceptable rate for a virus to spread. And then he decided that he's going to cancel all elective surgeries, which I understand and don't at the same time. Elective surgeries can mean a bunch of different things. It can mean, wanting to have a breast augmentation, if that's your prerogative, or if you want to have a nose surgery because you don't like the bump in your nose. Whatever it is, that's fine. But, that I can see as elective surgery where you'd want to postpone it. But also you have people that do get different types of surgeries because it depends on their health, or you have people who are transgender and they're in that process of finally getting the hormones or finally getting the surgery that they need, and then now it's being postponed because they're needing those beds and all of that equipment for people who are coming into ICU, and all of this could have been prevented. That is the crazy thing. All of this could have been prevented, but everybody wants to care about getting the money in their pockets and keeping their lobbyists happy and saying that God is in control, which, like, I'm not saying God's not in control. I'm not trying to say that to be flippant, but in the Bible, okay, this is my little me putting on my Bible hat. In the Bible, there are at least two books that talk about knowledge. That's Proverbs, that's Ecclesiastes. And for some reason, we have skipped over that knowledge part of the Bible and have used God to justify greed. Now, this is nothing new, of course, but now you have people's lives at stake. And this is exactly why Jesus flipped over the table at the church meeting or at the fair or wherever it was. I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention in Christian scriptures like I should have. All that to say, now we are in the house. I honestly am frustrated. I'm highly pissed off. I'm scared. I'm all of these different emotions, and I know a lot of people are too. When we go out, you know, I know when I go out, I try my best to wear a mask. I try to limit how much I'm going out. I'm going stir crazy. I'm talking to this rabbit. He doesn't hate me. He actually really, really loves me as he's crawling to sit underneath the desk that I'm recording this podcast in right now. So it's so cute. But yeah, so that's driving me nuts. And in the meantime, during quarantine, I decided to research my family history. And I've been on Ancestry.com. I'm only doing it for 14 days. I'm not paying for it. I feel like if you are, I was talking to somebody on Instagram about this. I feel like if you are Jewish, if you are African American, if you are Latino, if you are a non-white person, basically, you should be able to look up all of your family records for free. You should not have to pay for any of them. Because it is definitely an emotional journey. I've shared this again on Instagram and on Facebook, if you follow, that I've been looking for. I've been very curious about my family history. There are certain things that, like, I didn't know or I don't know. There are certain things I don't really care to find out, but I felt like now was the time, because what else am I going to do? So now is the time for me to really try to figure out, like, at least get some pieces of the puzzle together, right? My grandmother on my mom's side, my maternal grandmother, I remember bits and pieces about her, but she died when I was young, so I don't really remember a lot. I don't remember meeting my grandfather because I never met my grandfather because he died 3 years before I was born in '83. So I never met him. I don't know a lot about him. And I wanted to know more. So I did. I learned more. I found some things. Like, it was really cool to find a World War II draft card. It was cool to find out that some people were part of that fought in World War II and fought in World War I. I have a great-great-grandfather that fought in World War I in France. So that's pretty awesome. He spent 2 years there. So that was cool to find out. And then I realized the further I went back, the more not so cool it got. Great example is that I started to find that some of my female relatives were mulatto. And mulatto is a way that they said mixed or biracial way back in the day on the census. They don't use that anymore. And so I wanted to know, okay, well, how's this person mulatto? And again, in the back of my mind, I know exactly what happened with slaveholders and what they did to slaves. I get it. I knew it, but I think seeing what happened, or not seeing, because it's not like there was footage or photos, but kind of like, anyway, let me continue, then I'll be able to piece things together. So I went back, and then as I'm clicking on people's names, I got to like an 1860 census and an 1850 census, and I saw like free inhabitants, and it was all the white people, and then I found a slave census, And I was like, okay, fine. So one of them I found, it was Daniel Caldwell, fought in the Confederate War. He has his name on a plaque in Pike County, Alabama. And it's very important for all of y'all to know that, because if you hear about a plaque coming down, it was me. No, I'm kidding. I'm not traveling. Corona is the only reason why I'm not going there. And then his father, John Caldwell, was the one that he owned the slaves, and then I believe Daniel acquired some, if you will. So icky to talk about people like property, but that is what it is. And so that's how some of my family came to be. And they were in Alabama, and then they moved to Texas. They moved to North Texas and then settled in East Texas. So I'm really curious about how there's a lot of movement from the East Coast, like the Southeast Coast, to Texas. So I'm really curious about that, because it happened after the Civil War, when the Confederacy basically, they lost and it dissipated pretty much. And also Texas is part of the Confederacy. I think that it seceded at one point. Honey, I forgot Texas history. That was 7th grade, and 7th grade was 20 years ago. Anyway, so then I saw another slave census and the slaveholders, and I happened to look at the ages at this time. And the ages, the youngest was 2 years old. And I had to think in my head, what in the hell can somebody do with a 2-year-old child as a slave? Like, what are you doing? And then the next youngest was 3, and I believe the next youngest was 9. And I have been really in my feelings about that ever since I discovered it. And again, it's one of those things that I knew. But to just see it on paper, on a record, is just, there are no words to describe it. And so, yeah, I was in my feelings about it, and I was done. I shut it down. I think I'm going to be done after this weekend. I don't know if I can continue, but I would love to figure out from the information that I gather, I would love to know about my family pre-slavery. I want to know what country I came from in Africa. I want to know what we did there. I want to know what kind of queen I was. I'd love to dig deeper into the family that I know now, or the information that I know now. The way that I am, the way my mouth is, there had to be somebody that killed a slave owner. There had to be. That's just me. I'm not a murderer. That's not what I'm saying. But there's somebody that said, you know what, I'm not going to take you doing this anymore. And they were the ones that said, hiya. That's just my opinion on it. That's what I think, considering who I am. But maybe I'm wrong. But I hope not, because that would be really cool if there was a story about that. So anyway, yeah, that's been what's happened, and I haven't decided also if I was going to talk about the latest Black Lives Matter news. The cops that murdered Breonna Taylor they're still not arrested. They got fired though, but I'm like, that's cool. They need to be arrested. They need to be charged because they murdered that person. So it's a lot. And then there was something that came out about Elijah McClain. Elijah McClain was an 18-year-old young man who was walking to the convenience store to go get his mom something to drink. It's something I've done plenty of times for my mother. He was listening to music. He was bopping around, enjoying himself, and got a call of somebody thinking that he was suspicious. And when the cops confronted him, there's a whole dialogue or transcript of what he said. So, but I'm paraphrasing because it's so heartbreaking. But basically, he was just saying that he was sorry. He apologized, and he was saying he can't breathe, and he was saying that he's different, and he's just weird, and he's so sorry. And I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to know that this stuff keeps happening. Those officers aren't arrested. This happened in Colorado. They're luckily reopening the probe to find out, exactly why and what, why he died or what happened. I mean, we all know why he died, right? Because he was a young black man that quote unquote fit a description. It's maddening. And I don't know what else to say. But that is maddening. I'm sorry, hold on. My rabbit just attacked my foot, everyone. Can you lay down? Lay down, please. Lay down for mama. Love you. Mean it. You wanna hop? You can hop over there. Okay, sorry guys. So yeah, there's been a lot. I wish there was like really, really good news that's happened, but oh well, okay. I had to really think about it, but okay. So Dixie Chicks, if you know who they are, one of the best modern trio country singers of all time. I've loved them since 8th grade. They have changed their name to The Chicks. For those of you who are outside of the United States or North America who don't know, Dixie is very much tied to like the Confederacy. It's Mason-Dixon line is the line between where the Union was during the Civil War and the Confederacy, and Dixie is kind of like the nickname. I 100% believe, just because of the Dixie Chicks themselves, or the Chicks themselves, and how they are, they did not name themselves because they were like Confederate darlings, right? Like, it's not that they believe in the Confederacy and Southern or the Confederate flags and stuff. I believe they said it as like to say Southern Chicks. That's my opinion. Natalie Maines, who's the lead singer, if you don't know the story about her or about them, in about 2008 they were in England, and or 2007, and they said on stage that they disagreed with George Bush about the Iraq War, and people in England cheered, but the country music scene was like, we're done with you. The Opry disowned them. Radio stations went on this whole rant about disrespecting George Bush and our soldiers, which is not what they didn't disrespect soldiers, but basically stopped playing them on country music channels and country radio. So their next album, Not Ready. Oh, and then Toby Keith told them to shut up and sing. Jerk. So the next album that came out, which had the lead single Not Ready to Make Nice, was a fantastic album. Got no recognition from the country music industry, but got nominated for like 9 or 10 Grammys that year and won a bunch of them. So, I mean, what you gonna do? And then the great part was, in 2016, Beyonce was she nominated for Daddy's Girls or something? A song off of the Lemonade album is a very country, I say country inspired, it's a country song. And she was asked to sing and perform at the CMAs, and people in the country music industry lost their minds, and not in a, oh my god, it's Beyonce kind of way. And at the time, Dixie Chicks remixed the song with her, and she brought them to the stage too. It was amazing. It's probably the most black people that have ever been at the Country Music Awards. And you can't deny the genius that is Beyonce, the magic that was them and the Chicks. So they got their due. They got their payback, because it was like, you cannot get rid of them. They are some talented human beings, and they harmonize so well. Like, I still jam Wide Open Spaces. I love the cover of Landslide. Goodbye Earl. And, so for everybody that's like, we don't like people being political, Goodbye Earl was about killing your abusive husband. So, like, I don't know where you lost, like, where you couldn't find the politics in their earlier music, but that's your bad. Anyway, they changed their name to The Chicks, dropped Dixie, released a video called March. It is one of the most powerful, inspiring videos that I've seen. You definitely should listen. Or give it a watch. It will get you in your feelings, but good. It has a list of when there's a part where it says say their names, and you know it's George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, of course, and then the names keep going and going, and it's so heartbreaking. But they talk about how Black trans lives matter, and you know, sometimes when you realize you ride for the right people and you're a fan of the right people, like you're good. And I love being their fan, because as a Black person, loving the Chicks, I think I would have been so disappointed if they didn't take a stand. But again, it's one of those things that I wasn't worried about because of what they said about the Iraq War. So I wasn't too worried about it. They've been very open about being anti-Trump. All that to say is that was my good news. My good news is my favorite country group. I don't have that many country groups that are my favorite, but my favorite country group dropped, you know, the name because it didn't flow with their values. They're looking at the times now. They're adapting. They're changing. They wrote a beautiful. There's gonna be so many great, powerful Black Lives Matter anthems. And I don't think they're trying to hijack a movement at all. I think those intentions are pure. It's not performative. You can look over the course of their career and see, you know, how they've been active, and they're just amazing. Anyway, I could gush all day. Shout out to the Chicks. Go listen to that song, March. They have an album called Gaslight that's coming out. I'm so excited. So anyway, let me take a break. And if you're watching this video, I'm gonna drink some water. But I'm gonna take a break. And then we'll talk about Black Lives Matter and brands. Oh, you were right there. My little buns is right underneath the table. Okay, we're back. And I was wondering where my rabbit went, and my rabbit is underneath the table right by my feet, and he's laying down. You guys have to understand something. Rabbits are very, very scary, like in terms of trusting people, because they're prey animals. They're at the bottom of the food chain, which means everybody's trying to come for them. So when they stretch out and they kind of do this melting on the floor business, it means that they're very comfortable in their surroundings. I've been trying to buy his love since I got him in May. It's working, and he's just so freaking cute, y'all. He's so cute. He's a Netherland dwarf. He's all black. He's on my Instagram, so go look. But I'm not gonna pick him up. I'm not gonna put him in the video. You guys just take my word for it. He's adorable, and he hates carrots, and it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, so we're back, and there's a lot of brand news that's happened this week, and so I'm gonna talk about the brand news, and then we're gonna go into kind of my thoughts and feelings and opinions. Quaker Oats decided to get rid of the Aunt Jemima and the Uncle Ben's mascot after like hundreds of years. I mean, many decades. Maybe not hundreds, but it's been many decades, at least the late 1800s. And there's been some kind of like debate about it. And I'm not talking about the racists that are like, don't take away my racist Black woman off of my pancakes. Like, I'm not talking about that. One of the debates comes from the family of that Aunt Jemima is based off of, and they're worried that their families, their relative, their aunt, I believe it's like a great aunt, will be erased from history when you remove her from the box. Now, there hasn't really been this like uproar of like, get rid of Aunt Jemima, get rid of Uncle Ben. I personally am one of those people that's like, yeah, I know that that's racist, but I don't care. Like, my energy is not gonna go into like, oh my gosh, is this person racist, or is this racist, or is that racist? Like, I couldn't care less, because to me it's just rice. To me, it's at this point it's been forever. But Quaker Oats, the CEO decided, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to change it. There's no word on how they're going to change it yet. Also, Mrs. Butterworth is getting looked at, and there are a couple of other brands. It's very interesting. Like I said, I empathize and I actually understand where people were coming from with Aunt Jemima, but I also understand the need to get rid of it. So Aunt Jemima, the first one, the very, very first one, was based off of a racist stereotype of black women called mammies, which is very interesting because, side note, in Drill Team, our nickname for the mamzelles was mammies, and it was just odd. Anyway, so mammies were really were depicted as being plumped. They always had on a bandana. They were dark skinned, and they took care of the white children during slavery. They were the ones that raised them, as opposed to just their parents raising their own kids, whatever. So she was based off of the advertising agency, or the company at the time, and decided to use a particular person to create her, or to create the mascot, if you will, for Aunt Jemima. And then this person would go, and she would go to the fairs, and she would do cooking shows. And one of the arguments again about that history is that that was really the only job that she could get at the time. So she took it and she embraced it for what it was. Now, of course, again, there's something, it's called minstrel shows, which sounds very weird to say, but it's minstrel shows, and that's where white people would dress in blackface, which is why blackface is really terrible, and they would perform stereotypes of black people as comedy shows. So you have things like Sambo, for example, very dark face, I mean literally a black face, wide, like overly red lips. If you think about clowns, kind of get that with like just a black face. So that's why, again, blackface is terrible, because it was always used to put down African Americans. So that was how the Aunt Jemima brand came up. And then they recently, and I say recently, I want to say maybe 50s, 60s, they updated the mascot to what it is today. So she has her pearl earrings. She's slimmer in the face. She looks more of like a mom than she does like the help, but it still has a racist past. So now they're trying to figure out what to do with that. It's very interesting to me because I understand not wanting to erase history, like I said before. And I've kind of suggested to do what Looney Tunes does. So if you ever get Looney Tunes on DVD, or you happen to watch it on demand, there's usually a warning that says, this cartoon will contain stereotypes that were popular back in the day, but are not what we believe as a company now. We don't feel like erasing it was a good idea because it would take away from the cartoon or something along those lines. And I didn't know that because I used to watch Looney Tunes all the time. I had no clue that half of these things were racist until I saw the warning and then I watched the cartoon. And I was like, wait a second. Like, you were forever racist. They literally had a dark cartoon. It was like, a cartoon short, but literally like a Sambo cartoon. The guy was just skinny instead of being bigger. And I was like, oh God, okay. The rooster? Foghorn Leghorn is a Confederate, Raider Sam, a Confederate. It's Pepe Le Pew is a disgusting misogynist, which I've always hated him, so whatever. That didn't shock me at all. Speedy Gonzales, they started to take him out of the modern day cartoons because of the stereotype of Mexicans. So it's very interesting how things that are back in the day super duper racist are still popular now, but obviously the subjects wouldn't fly. And even things like The Office, The Office would not survive today. There's too much Me Too, there's too much racial stuff that, again, I pick and choose my battles. I understand the character of Michael Scott, so when he says and does stuff, it's like, oh my God, you're so terrible, which is the point. But nowadays it wouldn't flow right. So I understand why it wouldn't work today in today's climate, which is fine. That's fine. I'm not saying it should or we're being too sensitive about it, but it's very interesting how more aware we are becoming as time goes on. which is a great thing because we're not offending people, or at least we're trying not to. So, but anyway, back to Aunt Jemima, back to Uncle Ben, and Uncle Ben being the guy on the rice box. He is getting replaced. So that's going to be interesting to see what they come up with. I think to preserve the history of it, like, the best thing to do is be transparent. Like I said with Warner Brothers, you know, on your website, talk about the history of Aunt Jemima. Talk about who she was based off of. Like, at least give the mascot or the character, like, give her a name, give her a person, because she is based off of a human being. And so to leave that out would be terrible. And then talk about how it got updated. Talk about why it got updated. Maybe you updated it just because it was for the times. Maybe you realized that, like, that mascot at the time was, you know, now that it was 50s, 60s, like, that's not acceptable. That's fine. And then talk about where you are today with it. People love transparency. Brands, we love transparency. I want to know why you went from point A to point B. And if you do that, you're honoring the families, right? But then you're also just being honest, and then you're moving forward and you're taking a step forward. It's like Dove and it's like Ivory. You know, the soap companies were super racist back in the day. Being black was terrible, and, you know, to be clean, you became a white person. And that's what they advertised. And it's weird to see that, but I love Dove, and I know that Dove does not represent that stereotype today. So for me, knowing that and acknowledging that is something that I love in brands, where they don't just ignore it or they don't deny it, you know. So those are two brands that are making their changes. Another brand that's making a change is the Eskimo pies. So Eskimo pies are owned by Dreyer's, and they're the ice cream bar with the chocolate cover. I don't eat chocolate, so it's hard. I'm like, oh, I don't know, but I know what they look like. Eskimo is a derogatory term. I had no idea. Because I remember my mom used to say, like, Eskimo kisses all the time and stuff. So I had no idea. I grew up thinking Eskimos. The only thing I knew about Eskimos were that they were people who lived in, like, the very cold climates and in igloos, which is probably the problem in all of this, right? Like, we assume because it's what we see on TV. Well, Eskimo is a derogatory term for indigenous people, the Inuk tribe, who live in Canada and Greenland, and also the Yupik tribe, who reside in Siberia, and then, like, the surrounding islands there in Alaska. Again, had no idea these tribes existed. According to the Alaska Native Language Center at University of Alaska, the name is considered derogatory in many other places because it was given by non-Inuits. And again, if I'm saying that wrong, I'm so sorry. I looked everywhere to figure out how to say that. And was said to mean eater of raw meat. Nowadays, linguistics associate the word with net shoes. However, you know what? It's just best to avoid it. Racism is amazing. Not. So they're thinking of changing the name because they're realizing, like, okay, this is derogatory. And again, I don't think anybody approached that. I'm not aware. I've been looking to see what people have said about it. But, like, I was brought to the term that Eskimo was a derogatory term about a year ago. I don't use it often, but I just never thought of it again as it being a racist term. But I learned, and I said, okay, cool. We're not going to use it anymore in my daily language. It's pretty easy to say, okay, cool, right? And then I just, you know, now they're wanting to change the name, and I have no idea what there's nothing's out about what they're going to change it to so far. So that's going to be very interesting to watch too, and hopefully it's something creative and fun as well. And then last but not least, in some brand news, the month of July will be very, very interesting for Facebook. there are brands coming together that are pulling their advertising dollars from Facebook and Instagram, and they are not running any ads for the entire month. I hope they just continue it though. Like I hope it's a thing where it's like July, August, September, like until they really get a clue. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg has done this thing where, you know, Twitter and Snapchat have said that they are going to label anything that Trump says as like manipulative information or false information. Sorry, again, my rabbit just kind of went somewhere. Anything that's not true that Trump tweets, which is a lot of stuff, let's be honest, they're labeling it as false information so that isn't taken as fact. And that's also very important because the stuff that Trump lies about isn't like hummus tastes like chocolate, you know, like that's not gonna hurt anybody. That's not true, but it's not gonna hurt anyone. But he's lying about like the role of the army, or even if he's not lying, he's provoking violence. And you know, it gets his fan base riled up to commit these violence, which is why you see people who are very strong Trump supporters be a little bit more bold in their like racist, homophobic bigotry. I mean, it's kind of cute until they cross me. Anyway, so they're now there are companies that are like, that's not, oh, I'm sorry. So Facebook, on the other hand, said, we're not gonna really censor this stuff. And I'm like, but you probably should, because this is hateful stuff that's being spread on Facebook. The Daily Caller and Breitbart News, which is a very right-wing media company, are listed as trusted, verified sources. Which, what? Listen, clearly I'm not a Republican. Clearly I don't listen to right-wing anything. I don't trust Fox News because Fox News wasn't even created to be a news channel. It was created to be an entertainment channel. Just research that. It's very interesting. Anyway, I wouldn't want a severely left-wing to be a verified source either. Like when I personally look at my news, if it doesn't come from Maddow, if it doesn't come from NPR, I'm not really paying attention to it because I don't really trust it. That's just me. That's how I keep myself in my like zone of information. But anyway, having those two though be your verified, you know, what you fact check is actually really dangerous. And then Facebook said like, you know, we're just not going to do anything. We're not gonna hide or censor language because freedom of speech. Like, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequences. I'm gonna say that one more time. Freedom of speech is not freedom of consequences. All right? You can say whatever you want to, but there's also a consequence that happens. And people have used the example fire. You can yell fire in a building. But if you cause a panic and that panic ends up having people get hurt or killed because you said something, your consequence is that you're going to get in trouble for that. So yeah, you can say whatever you want. It's like when people want to say like, well, how come I can't say the N-word if I'm, you know, if it's in a song? You can. But if you're around the wrong person and you say the N-word and they hear you, who's to know what's gonna happen? In fact, I just don't like the word, but that's not the point. You get what I mean? So, yeah, Facebook, or people said like they've had enough. I know personally, I wrote that white supremacy was stupid on Facebook and I got my account flagged. I got a warning. I was like, but white supremacy is stupid, Mark. Clarissa, why are you still on Facebook? I don't know. I've been on it for about 16 years. I'm sorry, it's hard to let go. But again, Facebook makes 99% of its profit from ads, so I don't feel too bad for being on the platform because I'm not ever giving them my money. So there's that. There. But anyway, so NAACP, a little bit more on it. NAACP color change in the Anti-Defamation League called advertisers to boycott spending on Facebook for the next month to show that they will not support companies that put profit over safety. And that's super important too, because people's words really do drive emotion. So if you're calling somebody something really racist or really homophobic, that drives people to act in a negative way, and that can put people in harm. And we're a gun-toting country, so I mean, who knows what's to happen. There's a website that's called stophateforprofit.org, and it states they allowed incitement to violence against protesters fighting for racial justice in America in the wake of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, Rashard Brooks, and so many others. They named Breitbart News a trusted news source and made the Daily Caller a fact-checker, despite both publications having records of working with known white nationalists. They turned a blind eye to blatant voter suppression on their platform. They could use that time to support Black users. They could call out the Holocaust denial as hate. They could help get out the vote, but they choose not to. 99% of Facebook's $70 billion is made through advertising. So they ask, like, who will advertisers stand with? And they want to send Facebook a powerful message saying that your profits will never be worth promoting hate. That is anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, and violence. Sorry, I wanted to finish all of that. That's a very powerful statement and a really good statement. And I'm really curious to see like how many companies end up doing it in the month of July. But so far we have North Face, Patagonia, Upwork, REI, and Talkspace. They are pulling, and like each one, they put in about $50,000-$60,000 a month to run ads on Facebook. So that's a lot of money. I'm very curious again who's going to be added to the list of people to do that, because that'll show them, hopefully. Mark Zuckerberg has a very complicated history with being a good person. If you listen to, there's I believe 2 or 3 part series of Behind the Bastards that I continuously mention because it's one of my favorite podcasts, and they have about, like I said, a 2 to 3 part history about Facebook, about Mark Zuckerberg and kind of that transition from just being a social media platform into going into digital media, but like why he did it and how he went about it. And whoo, God, like why are we on Facebook, y'all? Like I wish Instagram would separate from Facebook, become its own thing, because I really do love Instagram, and I just kind of wish like Facebook would like not. I wish I could quit it, but it's almost 20 years. I need to let it go. I really, really do. So anyway, again, we'll see who gets added on. We'll see who does what happens next with this, and if they continue it. I would love for that to happen. I would love for advertisers to be like, you know what, I'm not advertising on Facebook anymore, because you have to hit them in the pockets. That's how you hurt brands. You hit them in the pockets. It's like I talked about with the girls from Vanderpump, the women from Vanderpump Rules, where they lost all of their sponsorships, and the company that does their podcast, like, that hits their pockets. That's the only way, well, you would think it's the only way that they would learn, but the developments after that is a whole other situation that doesn't need to be talked about. So that's some branding news, and all of that to say is it's very interesting to see these brands just kind of pop up and all of a sudden they support Black Lives Matter, right? And it's very interesting because Black Lives Matter has been around since 2013. It grew from, 2012. It grew from a hashtag about the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, whose name I'm not going to say on my podcast. And it later got recognized more in the streets during demonstrations following the 2014 deaths of Michael Brown, and which resulted in protests and unrest in Ferguson. And then Eric Garner in New York City, who also, I don't want to say coined the term because that sounds so terrible, but also was known for saying that he can't breathe when the NYPD was choking him to death. So the organization became official in 2013 on July 13th. And why didn't I write this down about who came up with Black Lives Matter. We're about to figure this out. We're about to figure this out because it's important to mention their names. So the founders are Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. They were the three women who took this hashtag and made it be something bigger that we see today and are chanting and wearing and saying proudly and boldly. And it's three strong women that I love and I think am very thankful for it. So then in 2016, Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers, if you haven't heard of him, was noticed to be sitting during the national anthem. And for him, it was a way to protest police brutality that was happening again with, at this time, like Freddie Gray, and there were some others that came about. When I say Sandra Bland, I'm not too clear on the dates because unfortunately, they all come together and it all becomes a blur. At first, people were, like, it was a big deal that he was sitting. He had a talk with a veteran, and the veteran was like, hey, why don't you just kneel? Which people kind of miss when they criticize him for doing this. Like, they miss the fact that, like, he talked to a veteran, an Iraqi veteran, more like it, and he said, sitting is more disrespectful, but if you kneel, that's more respectful. Told him to kneel, and people leave that out. Anyway, so he started to do that, and again, some people started to follow. At the time, coaches of NFL teams, such as Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, said if any football players are caught kneeling, they will be fined. And now all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter. Whatever. There's a lot with Jerry Jones, by the way, that, okay, sir, whatever. And of course, people were outraged, and they kept saying that, like, it was disrespecting our veterans, and oh God, it's basically cost him his NFL career, but it really started his activism career. So he's helping so many more people, I feel like, as an activist than he is as a football player. Not to say that playing football isn't worth it, but I believe everything happens for a reason, and this happened to him for a reason. And then the late Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant, a few others, were seen wearing I Can't Breathe t-shirts a little bit after the Eric Garner death from the NYPD during practice. And more NBA players were starting to pick up and talk about Black Lives Matter in the press conference. They were not quiet about it. So again, you hear me say it's 2016, 2014, 2012. Remember those dates because 2012 was 8 years ago? My God. So that's about 4 to 8 years ago. We've been talking about Black Lives Matter for 8 years. But then all of a sudden, 2020 happens, which, God, what is 2020 anyway? And you have COVID, and then you have this social justice uprising. And the crazy thing is when I remember when GDPR happened, and if you're an entrepreneur, you understand GDPR, or even if you're not an entrepreneur, you kept getting emails saying, like, we care about your privacy. And then they explained why they had to update, like, how you want it to be opt-in. Basically, it was if you do business online, like in the EU, they were changing their privacy laws, so all the businesses had to change and update their email list and privacy terms. It was a big headache for all of us, and it was a headache if you kept getting emails from companies, which we all did. And then COVID-19 happened, and it started to impact more people in the US, and so every brand was like, we care about your health. And so you got so many, what we're doing about COVID-19 at XYZ brand. Like, Jesus, okay, we get it. And now we have 3 types of emails that are coming out from brands. Now is our time to listen. Black Lives Matter. We're taking a stand against racial injustice. Now, listen, I'm happy that people have decided to do that. I'm happy that brands are willing to be open and talk about how they're listening and yada yada yada. But as a black person, I don't understand why it had to take somebody who got kneed in the neck for you to understand that Black Lives Matter. Black people have been here, and we have been going through some racial injustice for the longest time. And you said nothing about it. You did nothing about it. But then at the same time, I'm really happy that brands are speaking out. So I'm very conflicted as a marketer, I'm very conflicted as a brand strategist, and I'm very conflicted as a black person, how I'm supposed to handle all of this stuff that's happening, right? And there are people and there are brands that are getting called out. Like I just found out, or I was just reading something about Anthropologie yesterday. They were talking, I remember during the week everybody was posting the black squares and they said that we're listening, or like Black Lives Matter, and then somebody had posted a screen cap to them and said this is you, and it's something about, I don't know, it was something racist that they did. But then a story came out in BuzzFeed that said that the employees or Anthropologie would train their employees to use the term Nick or Nikki if they saw a person that looked like they were stealing. And they were using this with black and other minorities. And I know because I was in Urban, Anthropologie, and Free People, all three are the same company, and I've been followed in each store. So that wasn't a shocker. Wasn't a shocker at all. I had something in my hand. I was about to go show my friend who was white, or who is white. She didn't not stay white. Went to go show her, and I was being followed in the store. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go. Happened in Anthropologie. I actually ended up buying something. And it's something on sale because, honey, Anthropologie is expensive. And I was in Urban, the same thing happened. So none of that's a shocker. So for them to say Black Lives Matter and for this to be a thing is insanity to me. Not insanity. The fact that they would sit there and say Black Lives Matter as if they aren't stereotyping black people, that's insanity. And we're supposed to believe it and act like we don't have receipts. Sis, that's not how this works in this day and age. You can't get away with stuff. But then there are brands like Ben & Jerry's. Love Ben & Jerry's. Can't eat a lot of their ice cream because it's got gluten in it and I can't get sick. Or there's a cherry and chocolate flavor, which I'm like, that sounds disgusting. No offense to Jerry Garcia, who the ice cream is named after. But Ben & Jerry's has always been about that life. They very much said, we need to dismantle white supremacy. Boom. They even have a little graphic about how to defunding the police, and they have an ice cream graphic about what that means to defund the police. Listen, if you know anything about Ben & Jerry's, go check their receipts. They have been about immigration. They pay their employees, they're the people that package the ice cream together, pay them $16 an hour. I believe it's a lot of people that they hire are people who got out of prison, who need a job, which is so great for people who got out of prison because they can get money and it's a less chance of them to go back into the system. They've always been about that life. They've always talked about it. So seeing posts about Black Lives Matter from them is something that I'm like, okay, that's what I expect. I would be disappointed if you didn't say anything. They are very much have said the victims' names of police brutality. They are not afraid to speak up. They are a company about social justice. They've been about that life since the very beginning. I keep saying that. It's very important to reiterate that. And great. And I love that. And it makes me really happy. Target, I know that there's been some issues with Target. There's always issues with a lot of big brand and chain names, especially those that have different CEOs and move about. So it's the company history of Target isn't that great, or they're just faking it. And it's well, CEOs come and go, right? But for Target to release something when the riots, if you will, or the looting in Minneapolis the first day of what was just the George Floyd protest, for them to say, you know what, we can rebuild. It's fine. We're closing our stores in Minneapolis. They're gonna get paid as if they were working. Black Lives Matter. Like, they were like, we're not tripping about stuff. Like, y'all are tripping about property, you know? And that's really awesome to do. They've done a lot, especially recently, into growing their diversity within, like, the models and at least their marketing materials. Here's the thing, too. Diversity has to happen, and Black lives have to matter everywhere, right? So Black lives can't only matter in the front. Black lives have to matter in your C-suite. So if you're not hiring Black people in your leadership roles, is Black Lives Matter really meaningful? Do you really believe that? Or are you just trying to catch on with the trend? Because let me just tell you something. Black people's lives are not trends. I'm going to be Black today. I'm going to be Black tomorrow. I'm going to be Black in the next 10 years. And I'm going to be Black until I die. So I'm not a trend. Okay? Black people are not trends. So if you're going to really put out this message, brands, that Black Lives Matter, you really need to do the work. And if you're realizing that you haven't done the work yet, that's okay. That's you need to acknowledge that. Now is the time to acknowledge that. Let me do a little segue, because I'm good at that. There are local places, especially like my local news, that will highlight Black-owned restaurants. And you can always tell where the racist people come out, because they go, well, why does it matter what color they are? If the food is good, the food is good. Here's why it matters, sis and bro. Because in 1921, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, white supremacists decided to come into the town where Black businesses were owned, drop bombs, shoot guns, and just destroy everything that they made for themselves. Because for the longest time, it was okay to destroy what Black people worked so hard for post-slavery. And it is still okay today. They don't do it by way of dropping bombs from planes. They don't do it by way of just randomly shooting up people. Asterisk, they kind of do. But it's in the lending from the banks. It's in the codes from the government, the health codes, if they're looking at restaurants. If you get the wrong inspector, if you get a racist inspector, your restaurant can be done for. So yes, highlight Black-owned businesses. Highlight Black creators, Black influencers that are changing the makeup, hair, fashion game. Highlight the home decorators, because we don't see enough. And let me tell you something else. Representation matters, period. If we go back to Aunt Jemima and when it was created in a time where blackface was acceptable, where the culture was, this is how Black people are. This is how white people see Black people, and because we're catering to white people, we will make sure our marketing matches that so they will buy our product. Where in 2020 now, it doesn't work like that anymore. Most aren't seeing people the same way that white people saw Black people in the 1800s, right? So what happens is that, yes, you do have to change with it, and you have to understand that representation matters. We have negative stereotypes of people all over the world because, especially in Hollywood, you hire Middle Eastern people to play the role of a terrorist. So what, you keep the stereotype that all Middle Eastern people are terrorists? They are not. And according to the FBI, they are definitely not. And not that I like the FBI, but neither here nor there. We are working very hard at this moment. This is an awakening. And I know I weave in and out about why now to understanding why now. We are in an awakening as America. As America, we have to sit down and we have to literally look at ourselves, and brands have to look at themselves and go, what am I contributing to make Black people, to make minorities be targets of something so hateful? What are we doing? And how can we change that? That's at least my hope. My hope is that, and a friend was telling me this, and I really hope it's true. I hope that the pandemic, if it did anything right, it made people stay home, and it made people look at, this is what we've been talking about for years. This is what we meant by Black Lives Matter. We're not saying we want to get away with crime. We're not trying to get away with stuff. What we're saying is, if you can arrest somebody, if you can take the person who murdered 9 people at a Charleston church who were African American to Burger King to get him something to eat before he goes to prison, you can arrest somebody who fell asleep in a car, or who fell asleep in a car, who took your taser. You can control that situation, and that person can still be alive today. But you decided, because of the color of their skin, that their life didn't matter. And that's why we say Black Lives Matter. So if marketing, which plays a huge part and a huge role in how people see things and see other people, if they can really look at what they've done and say, okay, this is how we need to change our perception, or how people perceive Hispanic people, or how people perceive Middle Eastern people, et cetera, thank God, I hope that they're serious about this. I hope they're investing in getting the education, getting the training, because it's not something that happens overnight. You have to unlearn a lot of things. And listen, your brand can be as big as a Fortune 500 company, or it can just be little old you. You can change your perception. You can change how you market and put things out by simply looking at what you've done. Like, for example, say that you're a coach, you're a life coach, and you use stock photos for your blogs or for your webinars. What color are the people in your stock photos? If it's white across the board, you need to go on Unsplash, you need to go on Create Her Stock, and you need to find some Black people. You need to find some minorities. And here's the thing, when we talk about minority groups, also understand that's disabled people. That is also LGBTQ community. And when I say that, don't do this whole thing of, we have a Black person and how we're diverse. My college did that. They had one Black person on their website, one Asian, one Hispanic, and like one Middle Eastern person and a white person. And they were like, look at our diversity. And I'm like, this is corny. Don't do that. Okay, we're not saying to do that. But do something like Procter & Gamble has done really well with some of their companies like Tide, whenever they're doing commercials, and there's a stay-at-home dad who is washing clothes for his daughter that likes to wear the princess costume. And we don't know anything about the dad's history or like personal life. He could be a single dad. He could be a gay dad. He could be married in a heterosexual relationship, and he just chooses to stay home. Whatever the case is, it doesn't really matter, because we see this kind of gender swap, if you will, of a man doing the laundry and taking care of the kids. And that's great, right? We also see a lot of advertisement. Dove just did this for Father's Day, where we see a lot of different commercials and ads about minority men, especially black men, being dads to their kids, because there's this stereotype that black men are deadbeat fathers, and that's not all black men. And I say this as somebody whose dad isn't in her life. I know for a fact that that is a single situation that has nothing to do with, oh, because he's black, he's not a good dad. Like, no, that's his issue, right? But I have friends who are black men who love their kids to death and are there for them. And it doesn't really matter the relationship with the mom, other than that it's a good relationship. But they are there for their kids. They love their kids. They're ride or dying for their kids. They're going to the programs. They're in the plays. They're whatever the case is. And it's so good to see. But we've kind of done this stereotype over the years that all black men are bad fathers. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're not at all. Also understand too, in slavery, they used to separate the man from the child. So, you know, they weren't always in the household, and so there were a lot more single parents. Just understand a lot of the stereotypes stem from racism, from slavery. Anyway, so changing the narrative about like black fathers is huge. Changing the narrative of dark-skinned women is huge. Jenny Slate and Kristen Bell both play, this isn't about brands, but I like to talk about Hollywood as well. They both played biracial or African American characters in these adult cartoons, and that definitely not for kids. And they both decided, talking to the creators of the show, they said, you know what? We need to make room for black and like biracial or multiracial voice actors. So I'm gonna step away from the role. And I don't do the shoulda, coulda, woulda thing. That, from my understanding, both of them were signed on to do the show way before they knew what characters they were playing. So they were like, yeah, I'm on board, da 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 da. But you know what? They had a heart-to-heart meeting. The creators agreed with them, and they're moving forward. And white people, that's a way of using your privilege. When you can recognize, you know what, I need to make room for someone else, that's how you use your privilege. So let me go back to brands real quick. Let me go to brands. If you know that your advertising is so whitewashed, you make that commitment to do better. It's okay for you to do that. It's okay for you to brainstorm. You take normal everyday situations. I promise you, black people are doing the same thing. We cook. We do our hair in the morning. We shower. We work out. We go to work. We drive cars. We go for runs. Like, everything that like white people do, black people do too. Everybody does it. It's not a bi-race thing mainly. So kind of think about that, brands. Like, think about how you're representing. And you don't have to have a black person in just for Black History Month. I'm not saying that either. Let this be an everyday thing. Let this be an everyday practice. Literally look at your library of content, whether it's photography or it's, you know, you have people on your roster for illustrations or somebody that you're contracting out to, and look at who are these people. Who can you add on here? You can personally look up black illustrators. There's a lot of talented ones out there, and keep them on your roster and hire them. And I work in creative and marketing agencies, and let me tell you that the diversity in the marketing department is so small. I'm used to being the only black in a room. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pause, but my rabbit is thumping, and I don't know what he sees, and thumping in rabbit language means that he sees something wrong. Anyway, I've been the only black person in a room many times. I'm so used to it. When there's more than one black person, which is like me and another black person, we just stick together because it's like, ooh, it's another you. You were you, and you are me, and we are we. Like, that's just what happens, okay? marketing and creative agencies are notorious for having like mainly white people. So because of that, it influences what they put out. So again, brands, you have to hire from the inside out. I mean, you have to look at your diversity for the inside out. If you're saying Black Lives Matter and you're just like, we care about Black people and we're going to donate $10,000 to this Black charity, then that's great, but you're not really doing the work. Again, we're not a trend. We're always going to be around. So you need to do the work. How do you do that? I'm going to make this more concise and more clear, okay? How do you do the work? How do you look at what the heck you can do inside of your organization? One, audit. Audit everything from the inside out. Audit if you are like in charge of an agency, for example, or you have your own like connections and people that you contract out to, look at who they are. Why do you have them? I'm not saying that people don't hire Black people because they're all racist, but just think about it. And yeah, you're gonna have to think about it. And you're gonna have to acknowledge it, right? So look at who you're working with. Figure out who you can bring in. If you work for a company, for an agency company, and there's a Black person in the role escapes me, but it's in your not career role. Anyway, if there's a Black person that you are a manager of, bring that person, talk to them, have a casual meeting and say, hey, like, how do you feel about the company culture here? Like, how do you feel like we can improve? How do you feel like X, Y, and Z? And be prepared for some honest truth. Don't hold it against them. If they don't say, I mean, listen, for me, until a certain point, I would say, oh, everything's fine, everything's great. And I was like wanting to get in a car accident every time I drove to work. So yes, be aware that we're going to be on guard. But also just have a conversation with people of different colors. So I'm sorry, audit what you have, who you're working with, audit your content, because that's going to be very important too. What you put out is going to be more important and something that's an easy fix from here on out. People are looking and people are watching. So if you're saying Black Lives Matter and you only have white people in your photography, we're going to question that. Because we are some call-out people. We are a call-out culture to the fullest. Figure out what you can change. Okay, that's step 2. What can you change? I'm going to stick with stock photography because it's pretty easy across the board. Whether you create your own or you're downloading from a stock photo site, figure out, okay, I can add a Black person when we're talking about what desk fits your style. Whatever it is. Because it wouldn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to put a Black person in places where you would put a white person, for the most part. So look at where you can make that change. On another note, bigger brands. Well, not even bigger brands. Let's just go to step 3. Invest. Invest in diversity and inclusion training. Hire people that this is their focus on, because you will do your audit and you'll go, okay, well, this needs to change and that needs to change. But there's some other great information that you're going to miss out on because you won't know about it. And then you can't make those changes and make it permanent like you need to be successful and go forward. All right, so invest in a diversity and inclusion brand strategist. Hello. Invest in somebody, talk to people who this is what they do for a living. They talk about racism. This is their activism. See how you can, if they don't know or if they don't do the consulting, see if they can connect you to somebody that does it. Because that's going to be that's going to be very beneficial. It's going to be beneficial in your copywriting. It's going to be beneficial in who you hire, who you contract out or contract with. So yes, definitely get the training. Definitely get, and it's not that like culture sensitivity training that like you see on The Office, okay? It's not that. But it really makes you face your bias. And you need to. We all need to face our biases, right? So making a promise and have actionable goals. Katie Aarons went into light. I remember messaging her on Twitter and I said, this is me feeling a little spunky. And it was a couple of days after the George Floyd protest. But I remember messaging her saying, you're in Minneapolis. I don't understand why you don't have stuff on your website about what's going on. I was mad. I mean, I wasn't mad, like I wasn't angry, but I was like, listen, like, girl, what? You were in Minnesota, like, what's going on? And so she talked about it, but she said, I need to do more. She's like, you're right, I need to do more. And then there's a post of hers that she talks about, we're hiring more people of color for writers on the blog or for the website, and how, like, these are the actionable goals. And that is something that you look forward to, having dates in front of you. If you're saying, we're gonna hire 15 more Black people for executive type roles by, I don't know, November 2020, right? I mean, granted, there's a pandemic, but hear me out. Then you have a date, right? You have something that's set in stone. If you say, okay, I'm gonna upgrade and exchange out some posts or some photos of my post, I'm gonna have 15 different photos, and I'm gonna make sure this is done within a month to freshen up my content and to make it more diverse, then you're doing the work. You have actionable goals, you have a plan, and you have a goal, because you can plan anything, right? Like, I plan to go to England one day. I don't have an action for it, and I don't even think I can go to England because we're on a travel ban list, but whatever. But you can have a plan to do a lot of stuff, but if you don't have an action for those plans, then you don't really have anything. So audit, confront it, make a plan with some action, and then execute. And then look at where you're doing in the execution of it. Go about it, make those contacts. So listen, it's not scary. I don't know what people are scared of. It's not scary to reach out to people. You don't have to, listen, you don't have to reach out to Black creators and go, hi, our company is looking to add more Black creators. Just say, hey, we like your work. We think this is good and that is good. We would love to do a project with you. Do you have some time to talk about it? And that's it. Like, you don't have to be extra. You don't have to say we need more Blacks on our team, because that is not comfortable. As someone that's had that being said before, just, it's not a comfortable thing to be part of. And again, make sure you do the work. And let me tell you something else, brands. You might be getting fatigued, but so am I. But my fatigue isn't coming from talking about Black Lives Matter all the time. My fatigue is reminding y'all that Black Lives Matter. My fatigue comes from, there could have been a Black person in that spot. When you're talking about braids, why is there a white person? Why is Gigi Hadid in this space when you could have had a person of color? So yes, you might get tired, because this is the first time you really have to confront it, and you really have to put you've already said the words, and millions of people have already seen it. So you have to put up. And if you don't put up, trust me, your audience will call you out. I was telling somebody the other day, I would rather, like, if you don't mean Black Lives Matter, I would rather you just not say anything. Like, just keep posting like you've been posting. You don't have to say Black Lives Matter. If that's not your MO, like, if you're catering to the Trump supporters and white nationalists, which is the same thing, then that's you. That's on you and your conscience. I don't agree with that, and I won't be investing in you. But don't lie and say Black Lives Matter and then you do nothing about it. Because you can say it till the cows come home, but if you do nothing, you've done nothing. You've wasted everybody's time and breath. Trying to be cool with people's lives is not it. So look at your principles, look at your values, look at where your brand stands. What is your goal? What do you want to be remembered for? Again, Ben & Jerry's has some really great ice cream. Sometimes I cheat on the gluten and then my stomach, makes me pay for it. But I don't get Ben and Jerry's because I want to cheat on gluten. I get Ben and Jerry's because I know that I'm buying from a brand that cares about the same things that I do. I'm going to download music from The Chicks because I know that they have the same values that I do. Do you see what I'm saying? If I compare one company to another, one company is more expensive than the other. But the expensive company or the expensive brand is the one that's very actionable about social justice and they mean what they say, versus the other brand that just kind of said it and then didn't really do anything about it, or they got caught up in a lie and was like, wait a minute, what about all those times that you racially profiled or you denied leadership opportunities to your minority people? I'm going to go with the expensive brand. It's why I go to Target instead of Walmart. Like, Walmart is so problematic, other than eating my medication from there. Like, I don't go to Walmart anymore. I go to Target. I go to Target because the CEO said Black Lives Matter. Because they said we don't care about property damage. That can be replaced, but lives can't. Because I've seen Target over the years really try to diverse their marketing message. Are they perfect? No. Are they trying? Yes. So yeah, I'm gonna go to Target. My grocery bill might be a little bit more. Yes, I go to Target for groceries, too. But that's okay, because I know and I feel more comfortable about where I'm putting my money. See what I mean? So also understand, even if you're a solopreneur, if you're a life coach, if you don't say anything about Black lives, or you say something about Black lives and you don't do anything to improve yourself and your business to be more inclusive, but somebody who does the exact same thing does, and you're a little less expensive than the other person, or you're more popular than the other person, people are going to go with the other person because they know that they care. The more that Gen Z and the more that millennials grow up and become more of the buying power, outbuying the pace of baby boomers and some Gen Xers, not all. The more that social justice issues, not just pertaining to ourselves, but pertaining to other people, are gonna matter, especially with Gen Z. Wait until that generation is the biggest buying power. If you look like you don't care about the LGBTQ community, and that person that's judging you or considering buying from you is a white heterosexual male, he probably isn't gonna buy from your company. Because the way that Generation Z is, and this is why I don't like to talk mess about the younger generation, the way that Generation Z is, they care so much at such an early age about the rights of everyone, which is such a beautiful thing. Millennials are learning a little bit late because we were 90s kids. And that was a problematic era in and of itself. But we're out learning what we've learned then. But Gen Z, the information is right there. They're willing to learn. They're willing to speak up against their parents. Some are boomers, some are Gen Xers, and some are millennials. They're ready to speak up. They don't care about the consequences because they know what is right in their heart. So the longer that the more that they become a buying power, they're going to be buying with their heart. And that's statistics too. So many charts on that. It's a beautiful thing. And millennials are starting to do the same thing too. And Gen Xers do the same thing. Poor forgotten generation. I didn't forget y'all though. Y'all my boobs. So understand that as the tides are shifting, as times are developing and we're becoming more aware of things, Black Lives Matter is not a trendy statement. Okay, it's not something that's gonna go away like the GDPR. It's not something that we're gonna get tired of hearing about when we talk about the coronavirus. Okay, Black lives are gonna matter this decade, and the next decade, and the decade after that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're a brand who really means Black Lives Matter, do your work now, do the audit now, invest in the education, have a heart-to-heart talk about what's going on. I'm not saying kick people out of positions. I'm saying be more conscious, though, of who you're hiring next. Who are you promoting next? And if you think that person isn't quite ready yet, be a mentor to them. Because as a boss, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And that may not pertain to everybody, but that is something to really think about. So, do the audit, invest, make the commitment, and put it into action. And check where you are every single at certain checkpoints to make sure you are where you need to be. And then evaluate, what you can do and how you can be better. Or, I mean, I don't say congratulate yourself. I think that's kind of weird. Congratulations, you are, I don't know, I'm sorry. So there's that. But before we close, I would like to do a little homage, if you will, to Gay Pride Month. June is Gay Pride Month, and there was a tweet going around by a Caucasian male who is gay and said that Black people cannot hijack June to celebrate Juneteenth because we already have Black History Month and June is for Pride. Now, the last time I checked, white people aren't the only ones that can be gay. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so, because I know some people of color that are gay or transgender, bisexual, etc. And also, a very important thing to know, without a Black queer woman, you would not have Gay Pride Month. And yeah, that is something that needs to be said, because I don't understand why people don't understand. It's not Absolute Vodka that decided to create Pride Month. Put some respect on Marsha P. Johnson's name. Okay? Let's do a little summary of Marsha P. Johnson. She was part of the gay liberation. She was a self-identified drag queen, and she was very much an outspoken person for gay rights. When the Stonewall Uprising happened in 1969, she was definitely one of the leading prominent figures. When you think about Stonewall riots, you think about Marsha P. Johnson and how she played that role in leading that charge. And the uprising of Stonewall was demonstrations by the LGBT community where the police, after the police raided early in the morning of the Stonewall Inn in the Greenwich Village neighborhood in Manhattan, New York. And at that point, because being gay was still, they were trying to break up the gay neighborhoods, they were trying to throw people in jail for being gay. And like, honestly, they had enough. I mean, they had enough. Now, the mafia was owned Stonewall. So they were trying to say, oh, well, we're trying, this is a mafia raid. But, I mean, a lot of gay people, drag queens, lesbians, transgender people all gathered, like homeless youth all gathered in this place so they can just be themselves. And there were more protests. There were tons of protests that happened. They just wanted to be able to be open and to be free of who they are. And I don't understand why even in 2020 that's an issue. Excuse me. But yes, Marsha P. Johnson was the reason that Gay Pride happened. And if you have a problem with that, if you don't like the fact that Black people want to take over June, good sir, maybe don't celebrate Pride Month, because that was a Black queer woman who, she's the reason. she's the reason for the season, as people say during Christmas. So that's pretty much that. Oh no, it's not. Because I also want to talk about how her with Sylvia Rivera, who is another prominent figure of the LGBT community, how they both created what's called the Star House. And if you ever watch the show Pose, it's kind of something like this, where Marsha P. Johnson was a drag mother, and she would take in Black and Latino people of the LGBT community who were often kicked out on the street for being who they are. So she would provide food, and she would provide clothing, emotional support, just kind of like this way of being a family to these people who were kicked out by their own. And I'm not even going to I don't want to go there about her mental health or anything else like that. I mean, yes, it's very important to note that there was some mental health, but here's the thing. If you grew up Black in the 60s, especially as an LGBTQ person, I mean, how could you not, right? Think of all the things that you've seen and experienced in that time. So I just, it's a weird way to end the episode. It's 12:13 a.m. I've been recording for almost 2 hours, so it's an hour and a half. And Black lives still matter. And Marsha P. Johnson is the reason for Pride season. A Black queer person, and excuse me if I'm not allowed to say queer as a straight person. I've heard other people say queer. Anyway, my apologies. I don't want to be offensive to anybody. The next thing we'll talk about is I don't know yet. So just come back next Friday. Enjoy the episode. If you have any questions, I'm becoming more active on Instagram again. So, because I miss my peeps, I miss talking to you guys, I miss seeing friends. That would be fun to do. So yeah, just hit me up if you have questions, or if you there's a topic specifically that you want me to talk about, or you have questions. I might do a random Q&A for a podcast. I've got, again, some other really great things that I want to talk about and kind of really just open the conversation for when it comes to branding and how brands deal, especially with the LGBTQ community. I only know what I know from other activists and kind of, not hearsay, but things that I research on my own. But I would really love to, quote unquote, pass the mic to someone who is in the community, can offer better, stronger advice than I can. So we're going to talk about that. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Black Lives Matter. Arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor.